They chose someone else, and yet here they are again, trying to reach you like nothing ever changed. What if I told you? This message isn't really about you at all, but about something inside them that never found peace. Listen carefully, because this is where most people misunderstand what's happening. When someone walks away and gives their energy, their time, their intimacy to another person, you assume the story is finished. You tell yourself that you've been replaced, that whatever you shared has been erased. But the human psyche does not operate in such a linear way. It does not simply close doors. It leaves them slightly open, unfinished, unresolved. And now suddenly, there is an urgent message. Urgent, not because of you, but because something within them has been disturbed. Emotional displacement and unresolved attachment operate beneath conscious awareness, shaping decisions in ways that often appear contradictory on the surface. When someone forms a connection with you but then chooses to be with another person, it does not necessarily mean their feelings for you have dissolved. Instead, those feelings can become displaced, redirected, suppressed, or buried under the structure of a new relationship. The psyche, however, does not simply erase meaningful emotional imprints. What remains unresolved continues to exist as psychological tension. This tension emerges because attachment is not purely logical. It is rooted in memory, emotional investment, and internal symbolism. You may represent a certain depth, intensity, or identity that they were not ready to fully integrate. Rather than confronting that complexity, they move towards something that feels safer or more manageable. Yet avoidance does not equal resolution. The emotional bond becomes fragmented, not finished. Over time, this fragmentation creates an internal imbalance. Part of them adapts to the new relationship, while another part remains tied to what was left incomplete. This split generates subtle discomfort, moments of comparison, intrusive thoughts, or unexplained dissatisfaction. They may not immediately understand the source of this unease, but it gradually intensifies. Eventually, the mind seeks to restore equilibrium. This is when the displaced attachment resurfaces, often disguised as an urgent need to reconnect. The urgency is not necessarily about rekindling love in a pure sense, but about resolving the internal contradiction between what they chose and what they still feel. You become the focal point of that unresolved energy, not because you were forgotten, but because you were never fully processed to begin with. The unconscious pull toward unfinished connections arises from the mind's inherent drive to complete what has been left psychologically open. When a meaningful interaction ends without clarity, mutual understanding, or emotional resolution, it does not simply fade into the past. Instead, it becomes an active structure within the unconscious, continuing to influence perception, memory, and emotional response. This is not a deliberate process. It operates beneath awareness, shaping behavior in subtle but persistent ways. An unfinished connection holds a unique kind of energy because it lacks a defined conclusion. The mind cannot categorize it as fully experienced or fully released, so it remains suspended. This suspension creates a quiet tension, a sense that something important has not yet reached its natural end. Over time, this tension can manifest as recurring thoughts, emotional echoes, or a vague sense of incompleteness that surfaces unexpectedly. The pull itself is not always about the other person in a literal sense. Often, it is tied to what that person represents internally, an aspect of identity, a possibility that was never explored, or an emotional state that was only partially experienced. The unconscious uses symbolic associations, meaning the individual becomes linked to deeper psychological material that seeks expression. When someone who once walked away feels drawn back, it is frequently this unresolved structure exerting pressure. The return is not purely a conscious choice. but a response to an internal imbalance. They may interpret it as longing, curiosity, or urgency without fully recognizing that they are being guided by something unfinished within themselves. The connection becomes a pathway through which the psyche attempts to revisit, reevaluate, and potentially integrate what was previously left incomplete. Projection of desire onto unavailable people is a psychological mechanism in which an individual unconsciously assigns their own unmet needs, fantasies, and emotional longings to someone who cannot fully reciprocate. Instead of confronting these desires internally, the mind externalizes them, attaching them to a person who exists at a distance, emotionally, physically, or situationally. This distance is not accidental. It serves a function. It allows the individual to experience intensity without the risks that come with true closeness, such as vulnerability, rejection, or loss of control. The unavailable person becomes a canvas onto which idealized qualities are painted. Traits may be exaggerated or even imagined, creating an image that aligns perfectly with the individual's inner desires. Because the connection lacks full access and real-world friction, it is easier to maintain this illusion. There are fewer opportunities for contradiction, fewer moments where reality disrupts the fantasy. As a result, the emotional experience can feel powerful, even profound, despite being largely constructed from within. This process often reflects deeper internal conflicts. The person projecting may consciously believe they want a meaningful, stable relationship, yet unconsciously fear the responsibility and exposure that such a bond requires. By focusing on someone unavailable, they remain engaged in the idea of connection while avoiding its demands. The desire feels real, but it is directed toward a situation that prevents full realization. When circumstances shift and the unavailable person becomes accessible again, the projection can intensify or collapse. Either the individual attempts to act on the desire, or they encounter the dissonance between their idealized image and the actual person. What felt like certainty may then reveal itself as a reflection of their own unmet emotional landscape, rather than a grounded connection rooted in mutual reality. The illusion of moving on versus true detachment reflects a fundamental difference between behavioral change and psychological resolution. On the surface, moving on appears straightforward. A person enters a new relationship, adopts new routines, and distances themselves from a previous emotional bond. These actions create the impression of closure, both to others and to themselves. However, detachment is not defined by outward change, but by the internal reorganization of emotional meaning. Without that deeper shift, what looks like progress can be a carefully maintained illusion. When someone moves on without processing the original attachment, they often carry residual emotional imprints into the new situation. Memories remain charged, certain triggers evoke disproportionate reactions, and comparisons occur unconsciously. The previous connection continues to exist as an active reference point, shaping expectations and perceptions. This indicates that the bond has not been dissolved, but merely displaced into the background of awareness. True detachment requires integration rather than avoidance. It involves acknowledging what the connection represented, accepting its limitations, and allowing the emotional energy tied to it to settle without resistance. This process reduces the intensity of recall and removes the sense of psychological pull. The past becomes something understood rather than something still influencing present behavior. The illusion persists because external markers of change are easier to achieve than internal transformation. Entering a new relationship or altering one's environment can temporarily suppress unresolved feelings, giving a sense of forward movement. Yet under certain conditions, such as loneliness, conflict, or unexpected reminders, the underlying attachment resurfaces. This re-emergence reveals that the individual has not fully detached, but has instead created distance without resolution, maintaining a hidden continuity between past and present experiences. Guilt and cognitive dissonance in divided loyalties arise when a person's actions conflict with their internal values or emotional truths. Cognitive dissonance refers to the psychological discomfort experienced when holding two contradictory beliefs or behaviors at the same time. In the context of relationships, this often occurs when someone commits to one person while still feeling emotionally connected to another. The mind seeks consistency, but divided loyalty disrupts that balance, creating tension that cannot be easily ignored. Guilt emerges as an emotional signal that something within this arrangement is misaligned. It may not always be consciously acknowledged, but it influences behavior in indirect ways. The individual might overcompensate in their current relationship, attempting to prove commitment through increased attention or reassurance. At the same time, they may experience intrusive thoughts or emotional drift toward the unresolved connection, which intensifies the internal conflict. To reduce this discomfort, the mind often engages in rationalization. The person may reinterpret their past connection as less meaningful than it was, or exaggerate the strengths of their current relationship. These narratives help create a temporary sense of alignment, but they do not eliminate the underlying contradiction. The unresolved attachment continues to exist beneath these justifications, maintaining the state of dissonance. This internal split can lead to instability in decision-making. The individual may alternate between emotional withdrawal and sudden attempts to reconnect with the past. These shifts are not random, but reflect the ongoing effort to reconcile conflicting internal states. The urgency to reach out often intensifies when the dissonance becomes difficult to manage, as contacting the unresolved connection appears to offer a pathway toward reducing the psychological strain, even if it complicates external circumstances. The return of suppressed feelings under pressure occurs when emotions that have been consciously or unconsciously pushed away begin to resurface due to internal or external stress. Suppression is not the same as resolution. It is an act of containment. The mind temporarily buries emotions that feel overwhelming, inconvenient, or incompatible with current circumstances. However, these emotions do not lose their psychological charge. They remain active beneath awareness, continuing to influence mood, perception, and behavior. When life becomes stable and distractions are strong, suppression can appear effective. The individual may believe they have moved past a connection or fully detached from a previous emotional experience. Yet this stability is often conditional. Under pressure, such as loneliness, conflict, emotional fatigue, or moments of reflection, the mental defenses that maintain suppression weaken. As those defenses loosen, the stored emotional content begins to rise to the surface. What returns is not always the memory itself, but the emotional intensity associated with it. The mind reactivates unresolved feelings, often blending past experiences with present circumstances. This can create a sense of sudden emotional urgency, as if something unfinished demands attention. The individual may not consciously recognize why these feelings are reappearing, but they experience them as compelling and difficult to ignore. This process is intensified because suppressed emotions tend to grow more complex over time. They are not processed in real time, so they accumulate layers of interpretation, regret, or idealization. When they resurface, they carry this accumulated weight, making them feel stronger than they originally were. Under pressure, the psyche seeks relief from this internal buildup. It may redirect attention toward the original emotional source, which can include a past relationship or unresolved connection. The return of feelings is therefore not a random emotional relapse, but a structural response of the mind attempting to restore balance by confronting what was previously set aside without resolution. The symbolic meaning of urgent messages from the psyche refers to how the mind communicates unresolved inner states through emotional signals that feel immediate, compelling, or impossible to ignore. These messages are not literal communications from external sources, but internal psychological events that emerge when something within the emotional or relational landscape has not been fully processed. The psyche uses urgency as a mechanism to draw attention to material that has been neglected or suppressed, ensuring it re-enters conscious awareness. This urgency often arises when an internal imbalance reaches a threshold. Thoughts, memories, and emotions that were previously managed or pushed aside begin to cluster together, creating psychological pressure. The mind translates this pressure into a felt sense of importance, as if something critical must be addressed immediately. This is why such experiences can feel deeply personal and emotionally charged, even when there is no external event justifying the intensity. Symbolically, the message can take many forms. It may appear as sudden thoughts about a specific person, emotional restlessness, or a strong impulse to reconnect with something from the past. The content of the message is less important than what it represents, a part of the inner world demanding recognition. The psyche communicates through symbols because it operates in images, emotions, and associations rather than direct language. Urgency itself is a psychological strategy to bypass rational dismissal. When something feels urgent, it interrupts normal cognitive filtering and forces attention. This ensures that unresolved material cannot remain indefinitely in the background. However, the meaning of the urgency is often misunderstood. It can be mistaken for destiny, intuition, or external guidance, when in reality, it is the mind attempting to restore equilibrium by bringing attention to neglected emotional structures that require integration rather than immediate reaction or impulsive action. Fear of loss triggering delayed realization occurs when emotional clarity does not emerge during the presence of a connection, but only after its absence becomes real or threatened. While a relationship or bond is active, the mind often adapts to its availability, reducing awareness of its full emotional significance. This adaptation creates familiarity, and familiarity tends to dull perception. As a result, the depth of value is not fully recognized in real time because the psyche treats what is consistently present as stable and therefore less urgent to evaluate. When the possibility of loss arises through separation, distance, or emotional withdrawal, the internal structure changes. The mind is no longer interacting with certainty, but with absence, and absence activates a different cognitive and emotional process. It begins to reconstruct what is missing, often amplifying its importance in hindsight. This reconstruction is not purely logical. It is deeply emotional, shaped by memory, regret, and contrast between presence and absence. Fear plays a central role in this shift. It disrupts the assumption that access will always remain available, forcing the individual to confront the finite nature of the connection. This confrontation generates heightened awareness, but it is delayed awareness because it emerges after the stability of the bond has already been disrupted. The realization feels sudden, yet it is actually the result of accumulated emotional data that was previously overlooked. In many cases, this delayed clarity leads to internal conflict. The person may question their earlier choices, reevaluate past interactions, or feel an intensified pull toward what is now perceived as lost or slipping away. The urgency to reconnect is often not rooted in present evaluation, but in the psychological impact of potential loss, where the mind attempts to recover what it has only just fully recognized as meaningful when it is no longer securely within reach. The shadow self-influencing romantic decisions refers to the way unacknowledged aspects of personality shape attraction, choices, and emotional behavior in relationships. The shadow is not something external. It consists of traits, desires, fears, and impulses that a person has not fully recognized or accepted within themselves. Because these elements are pushed out of conscious awareness, they do not disappear. Instead, they operate indirectly, influencing decisions in subtle and often contradictory ways. In romantic contexts, the shadow can affect who someone is drawn to and why. Attraction may not always be based on conscious compatibility or shared values, but on unconscious recognition of disowned qualities. A person may feel strongly pulled towards someone who reflects parts of themselves they have suppressed or rejected. This creates intensity that feels compelling, but is not always understood at a rational level. The shadow also influences patterns of repetition. Individuals may find themselves in similar emotional dynamics across different relationships, even when they consciously intend to choose differently. This happens because the underlying psychological material has not been integrated, so it continues to express itself through external situations. The mind attempts to bring these hidden aspects into awareness by recreating scenarios where they become visible. In decision-making, the shadow can create internal contradiction. A person may consciously prefer stability, but unconsciously gravitate toward emotional intensity or uncertainty. This split leads to mixed signals in behavior, such as pursuing closeness while simultaneously creating distance. These contradictions are not random. They reflect the tension between the conscious self-image and the unacknowledged parts of the psyche. When emotional pressure increases, the shadow influence becomes stronger. Under stress, rational control weakens and unconscious material rises closer to the surface. This can lead to impulsive choices or unexpected emotional reactions in relationships. Understanding this dynamic requires recognizing that romantic decisions are not driven solely by conscious preference, but also by deeper internal forces seeking expression and integration through interpersonal experience. Emotional timing mismatch between two individuals occurs when the readiness, psychological state, and emotional availability of each person are not aligned at the same stage of their connection. Even when two people share genuine feelings or potential compatibility, the internal timing of their emotional development can differ significantly, creating imbalance in how the relationship unfolds. One person may be open, reflective, and prepared for depth, while the other may still be processing past experiences, unresolved attachments, or personal uncertainty. This mismatch often leads to misinterpretation of intentions. The more available individual may perceive hesitation or inconsistency as lack of interest, while the less available individual may feel overwhelmed by the pace or intensity of emotional engagement. Neither perspective is necessarily incorrect. Rather, they reflect different internal rhythms of readiness. Emotional growth does not occur uniformly, and individuals rarely arrive at connection with synchronized psychological states. As the mismatch continues, tension begins to form. The person who is more emotionally open may experience frustration or confusion due to delayed reciprocation, while the other may feel pressure that amplifies their internal resistance. This dynamic can create a push and pull effect where closeness alternates with withdrawal. The connection becomes unstable not because of absence of feeling, but because of difference in timing. Over time, this imbalance can lead to separation or missed connection, even when mutual interest exists. One individual may move forward believing the opportunity has passed, while the other may only later reach a state of readiness where they can fully understand what was present. This delayed alignment often gives rise to reflection and reconsideration, where the significance of the connection becomes clearer only after the moment for natural synchronization has already shifted, leaving both individuals with a sense of incompleteness shaped by timing rather than absence of emotional depth. The difference between longing and genuine love lies in the psychological foundation from which each emotion arises. Longing is primarily rooted in absence, incompleteness, and imagination. It emerges when a person is not fully present in one's life or when access to them is restricted. Because of this distance, the mind fills the gaps with idealized interpretations. The emotional experience becomes intensified not by actual interaction, but by anticipation, memory, and projection. Longing thrives in uncertainty, where the lack of closure allows the imagination to construct an amplified version of connection. Genuine love, in contrast, is grounded in reality and sustained engagement. It develops through consistent experience, mutual recognition, and the integration of both strengths and limitations of the other person. It does not depend on absence to maintain intensity. Instead, it deepens through presence, where the full complexity of the relationship is visible and continuously negotiated. This includes moments of disagreement, imperfection, and adjustment, which gradually shape a stable emotional bond. Longing tends to idealize. It selects fragments of memory or possibility and elevates them into a complete emotional narrative. This creates emotional intensity but also instability, because it is not anchored in the full reality of the other person. Genuine love, however, includes disillusionment as part of its development. It survives the transition from idealization to realism, adapting to what is actually present rather than what is imagined. Another key distinction lies in emotional dependency. Longing often increases with distance and decreases with clarity or resolution. Genuine love, however, remains relatively stable regardless of temporary emotional fluctuations because it is not dependent on absence or mystery. It is built through sustained understanding rather than emotional projection. Over time, the mind learns to differentiate between what is amplified by distance and what is supported by lived experience, revealing whether the feeling is sustained by imagination or by authentic relational depth rooted in shared reality and continuous presence. The psyche's need for closure and integration is a fundamental psychological drive that seeks to resolve unfinished emotional experiences so that internal balance can be restored. When an experience remains incomplete, whether through sudden separation, unanswered questions, or unresolved emotional intensity, it does not simply fade away. Instead, it persists as an active internal structure occupying mental and emotional space. The mind resists fragmentation, so anything left open continues to generate subtle pressure toward resolution. Closure is not just about understanding what happened, it is about the emotional system reaching a point where the experience no longer demands attention. Without this, the psyche repeatedly revisits the situation in different forms, such as intrusive thoughts, memory loops, or emotional reactivity. These repetitions are not random. They are attempts by the mind to complete what was left unfinished so that psychological energy can be freed and reallocated. Integration goes deeper than closure because it involves incorporating the experience into the broader sense of self. Instead of rejecting or idealizing the past, the mind reorganizes its meaning. This means acknowledging what was real, what was projected, and what was learned. Through this process, the emotional charge of the experience gradually decreases, not because it is forgotten, but because it has been understood and absorbed into personal narrative. When integration does not occur, the unresolved material remains split off from conscious awareness. This can lead to recurring emotional patterns, repeated relationship dynamics, or sudden resurfacing of feelings that seem disproportionate to present circumstances. These are signs that the psyche is still attempting to process what was left incomplete. The drive for closure and integration is continuous until equilibrium is achieved. It is not dependent on external resolution, but on internal acceptance and meaning-making. Once integration occurs, the emotional memory loses its disruptive force and becomes part of a coherent psychological structure rather than an unresolved fragment seeking attention through repeated emotional return or symbolic reactivation.